Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're watching this from. On behalf of the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement and Water Policy Center, it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished chair, Raosaheb Bawaskar, speakers and participants who registered for the event. We're so glad that you could join us today at the NICE WPC International Conference on Post-Pandemic World Order, Navigating the New Normal. Today is the third and last day of the conference, which was inaugurated on 29 August 2020 by Mr. Pradeep Gewali, Foreign Minister of Nepal, and Dr. Abdullah Rashid Ahmed, State Minister of Maldives, and other high dignitaries. We have around 150 experts and speakers joining us from 30 different countries who have been delivering their presentation and sharing their expertise with us. This is 21st session of the conference, and to chair and moderate this session, it's a real pleasure to have Raosaheb Bawaskar here with us. Mr. Raosaheb Bawaskar is a policy analyst focusing on China's global strategy and India's foreign policy. He's been teaching international relations. Mr. Raosaheb Bawaskar is a policy analyst focusing on China's global strategy and India's foreign policy. He's been teaching international relations for more than 10 years in various prestigious colleges in Mumbai. Apart from this, Mr. Bawaskar is founder director of VGF's Water Policy Center, Aurangabad, where he works on water governance and water security. He had been awarded ICSSR Doctoral Fellowship 2013-2015 to research on rise of the BRICS and global power shift at the University of Mumbai. He has presented research papers at international conferences in Singapore, China, and South Africa. Currently, he is working on water governance in China for book projects as a co-editor to be published in 2020. Mr. Bawaskar is co-founder of the Mumbai School of Thoughts, a Mumbai-based policy forum. He writes on China's global strategy, BRICS and power shift, global governance and security, and global cities. So without any further ado, let's get started. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Gayatri, for this very wonderful introduction of mine. And thank you all the
Please unmute yourself, Rao. We can't hear you. Okay,
thank
yes,
you,
we can hear you.
Gayatri, for this wonderful introduction of mine. And I thank Pramod for giving me this opportunity to chair this session. And it is my privilege to chair this session, which consists of very distinguished scholars from across the world. And in the beginning of this session, I will say, this is the time where we are. This time we can say is a time, very critical time for all of us, and it is a vital for us to engage in such a collective reflection at this critical point of time. And I believe that the COVID-19 has not fundamentally altered the course of history, but also changed the way of life to people across the world. So our world will be profoundly different what was yesterday and what we expressed before the pandemic. And it has become a catalyst, because the pandemic has become a catalyst for changing everything across the world, from our day-to-day life to the politics to the economics to the science and everywhere. And I think the post-COVID world, what has been discussed in the inaugural session of the first day as well, where all scholars were very worried and speculated that the world will be, the future world will be like divided, disrupted, and dangerous, where the entire world will be, we can say, unstructured and a disordered kind of situation. So in this context, I think, I'm sure, yeah, this panel, speakers in this panel will certainly extend the debate, the discussion we started 3 days before, in the inaugural of this conference. What kind of world order will be established? What kind of the world order will be look like? And I'm sure this panel will extend that debate and will put something different and something constructive kind of ideas in this 3-day discussion. So with this, we are very senior professor, and we are very, we can say, distinguished scholars and professors. We are Professor Balivir Arora. We are Dr. Punit Gaur from Kazakhstan. We have Dr. Anmol Mukhia. We have Dr. Maria Saildo. But among all these scholars, I would like to uh, invite Professor Balwil Arora, who is a senior most in this panel and who is a chairman of Center for the Multilateral Federalism, Institute of Social Sciences, India, and he will be speaking on water for everyone forever, water federalism and sustainable solutions. Professor Balwil Arora, the floor is to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Bawaskar. And it's a privilege to talk under your chairmanship because you are heading the Water Policy Center. And my subject is primarily water. I thank also the organizers, and I thank notably Pramod Jaiswal for having asked me to be a part of this panel. As you were saying, Rao, the whole business of forecasting the future has been thrown into turmoil. It has become increasingly difficult to look at the 2050 horizon, the 2047 horizon that India has been talking about, 100 years of independence, even the 2030 horizon. So first point that I would like to make is that it is difficult at this stage to even predict what 2021 will be like. We make projections, we make calculations, but there are certain constants, there are certain variables, and forecasting has increasingly become a mathematical science where you analyze data and you project. I think social scientists need to reflect on deeper issues where the way in which we think, the way in which we work, and I know that geopolitics is a different area where there may be a certain amount of stability, but even there, I'm not sure. So I would like to begin with this theme that one of the things that people from geopolitics have been talking about is that there will be water wars in the future. Where does that prediction stand? Personally, I have not given it too much importance in my own thinking because I have always felt that when the time comes, a solution will be found. That doesn't stop us from reflecting on the fact that water is a scarce resource, that it is poorly managed, that it is essential for many of the objectives that we have set before ourselves. In the water and sanitation hygiene form, WASH as it's called, is that you need water for sanitation, you need water for hygiene, and under COVID, you're told constantly to wash your hands. Unless you have water, how can you wash your hands? And now, increasingly, the impact on nutrition of COVID again brings back the focus to water. How? You'll ask me. Nutrition is one of the key elements for building up immunity. And unless you have sanitation and hygiene, your children will not absorb sufficient amount of nutrition. Particularly, I would like to say, the girl child, who is always the first to bear the brunt and the cost of any scarcity, of any situation of penury. You know that the government of India first talked about a national water mission. Earlier it talked about cleaning the Ganga, but that was not a significant contribution to solving the water problem that had other overtones. But the water mission, Har Ghar Mein Jal, And now the Prime Minister is talking about nutrition. I think it is, all these issues are connected, and therefore I would take a holistic perspective in looking at where we are heading in the management of water and what can we do better. So the basic idea that you are looking at is how do we provide the water that is needed for, there we are. How do we provide the water that is needed for, yeah, thank you, we keep it there. How do we provide the water that is needed for attaining all the other national objectives? So the first, my presentation to you is in two parts. There is one section which is devoted to the Water for People approach. Now, Water for People is an organization with which I'm involved, and we'll talk about that. The second part is titled Water Federalism 2.0, and then I'll end with a few words on sustainable solutions. So, water as a right. Next slide, please. Water is a scarce commodity. As I said, laws of market, wait a minute, cannot apply. The claimants are many. The principal claim, because mankind dominates the earth's resources, is human consumption, both for agriculture and for personal uses. But there are other claimants too, which we need to keep in mind: animals, birds, flora, and fauna. The principle of sharing is at the core of what I have chosen as the mainspring of this presentation, and that is the federal principle. The federal principle sharing is at its core. Sovereignty is shared, resources are shared, power is shared. Therefore, federal principles assume salience when you talk about managing water. Water as a right, I said, the right to potable drinking water is seen as part of the right to life and liberty. That's under Article 21. It also has been interpreted under the right to equality in terms of equal access and non-discrimination in access, because that is one of the major problems of access to water, is discriminatory distribution. And so since Article 15(2)(b) prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, caste, gender, etc., on use of public resources, caste is one of the features where there is water deprivation. Gender is important because the burden of providing water is on the female gender, both girls and women. So I think from both these points of view, water as a right is established. And then the directive principle, Article 39(b), which requires the state to ensure that ownership of and control of material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good. Next slide, please. This is how we relate, because we're looking at the future. The Sustainable Development Goals are still there for us as a target. And what you see before you are 17 goals, of which water is the goal number 6. But the point here that I am making is that this goal is linked to a host of other goals, because SDGs are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future. I think that goal remains. In terms of how it is to be achieved, we are beginning to rethink. The challenges that were identified: poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and justice. All these challenges, even after the pandemic, I don't see a significant change. I do see increase in poverty, increase in inequality. On climate change, the jury is still out. On degradation, it's an open issue. But peace and justice. On environmental degradation, let me say something, is that there is a tendency to use the pandemic to push forward agendas which are clearly detrimental to the principles that we are working for. The legislation for the protection of the environment is sought to be changed, made more subtle, more supple, to allow industries not to be submitted to an environmental impact assessment. So this is something that we have to watch out for, that under the cover of pandemic, we may end up at the end of this situation with agendas that have been pushed forward covertly, surreptitiously, taking advantage of the pandemic. I won't go into more examples. There are many which make recovery more difficult at the end of this, when we come out of it, which we still don't know when. As I said, the 17 goals are interconnected, and in the interest of equality, in order to leave no one behind, it is important that we achieve them all. Hence, the motto of Water for People is everyone, forever. Forever means sustainable. Everyone means inclusiveness. Next slide, please. This is the road to everyone forever. The process, I will just run you through it briefly. The building everyone forever, the first step is, and the checklists, the checkpoints, the check boxes are there. And then you go on to the, first you identify the capacity building, the financial assessment, the district and water resource management planning, and then you identify the household, the community, the school, and the clinic, which have to be included and provided. Then you move to the institutional strengthening and advocacy in the forever focus, and then you slowly reduce it to an oversight role before exiting, and all the criteria are there. So this, in a nutshell, is the roadmap for building this model, the everyone forever, which I just wanted to present to you. Next, please. It spells it out a little more in detail: school, clinic, household, with access to water and sanitation. And then forever, as I said, systems that last, that ensure that the districts never need another WASH NGO again. Principle of co-investing is at the core of it, and local governments, local self-governments, and also using public funding which is made available. I mentioned the national missions, I mentioned the state funding, and of course the local government funding. We'll come to this when we talk about multi-level federalism. All these have to be harnessed. So it's not as if you replace the government funding, the public funding. You don't supplant it, you only complement it, you only support it. And then in the monitoring, and then the scale and replication, where you first develop the model and then go on to a national level. Next slide, please. This is a brief overview of the strategic priorities and presence. You have a map there which shows where Water for People is working. Tamil Nadu, it has completed the projects in 3 or 4 districts and has withdrawn. In Maharashtra, the project is in Amravati. I've always maintained that coloring the whole state can give a false idea that the whole state is being covered. No, the districts that are covered, the district is the basic point of reference. The figures in red, the red dots are completed projects and the blue are active projects. The statistics on what has been achieved, we haven't ended the period. This was reviewed in 1920, early 20, but then COVID struck, so we don't know whether 2023 is a viable target for all that we had set out. But then that is the fate of all targets which had been set. They will have to be reviewed and revised. Next, please. No, I think we've seen this. So we come now to the part 2. No, we are going fast. Where part 2 starts? Yes, water federalism. Thank you. Now we move to water governance and water security. And I would like to take you beyond the question which has preoccupied much of the debate on water sharing in India, which is the sharing of interstate river waters, their management, and the disputes that arise from it. It's a well-documented subject. It is what I would call water federalism 1.0, which is, there's a lot of material, I don't want to repeat it. It is basically, it's an important area, and there is a lot to be said about how the dispute mechanisms and the ways in which it is being handled can be changed. One of them, I'll come to that, is the insufficient development of horizontal federalism in resolving interstate river water disputes and management. By horizontal, I mean states which are involved in the water basin having sufficient mechanisms and incentives to get together and resolve these issues. So the causes and consequences of why this is not happening need to be studied. The Schedule 7, you are familiar with regulation and development of interstate rivers and river valleys in the Union List, item 56. What I will argue is that a multi-pronged and multi-level approach is dictated by the very nature of the resource, which is the scarcity. So it has to be properly managed at different levels. Next slide, please. And here I introduce you to the concept of cascading federalism. Cascading federalism is derived from the image of cascading water, and it's most appropriate for this presentation, but I've used it elsewhere also. Cascading federalism refers to the need in federalism for the powers that are shed by the center to the states, that are shared with the states constitutionally, but also in operation, that they should, like a water cascade, go down further to the third level of government, which is the Panchayati Raj system. So that cascade should not be stopped. The natural flow is to move down, but at the states there are checks and there are blockages which stop the powers from flowing down further. So the plea is that we work towards a cascading federalism, and particularly insofar as water is concerned, it is a most appropriate way of looking at it, because as you get closer to the ground, the importance of the local becomes more. The distribution of responsibilities clearly dictates the need to follow water cascades, and as I said, the transfer of powers and resources. Vertical federalism has developed disproportionately in cooperative federalism paradigms. This whole cooperative federalism is basically cooperation between the center and the states, which is what I refer to as vertical federalism, and which has led to the emergence of command and control federalism, which negates the very cascading principle of federalism. The choking points need to be identified, and the states want to micromanage in much the same way as the center seeks to micromanage them. And self-government therefore falters because new equations that have emerged in the relationship between the center and the district collectors directly go in a different direction, and therefore these are to be observed, because this is one of the outcomes of the pandemic. The Disaster Management Act and the Epidemics Act have given the collectors rightly great powers, but they have also given the central government powers to dictate to them, to give them directly orders, which is creating a problem sometimes for the cascading federalism principle. Next, please. This brings us to the concept which is at the core of this cascading federalism debate, is multi-level governance structures for local self-government and community participation exist, but there is a patchy record of implementation. And what the pandemic has shown, and this is more reference to the overarching theme of this seminar, is that the health systems performed better on water and sanitation where robust local self-government systems were in existence. Robust functioning self-government systems performed better in water and sanitation, and also in their COVID scores. So there is a strong empirical case to be built up in favor of having robust functional local self-government system. I've given the distribution according to the Indian Constitution. I think this is just for reference. Item 17, and then the schedule 11 and 12. This is the institutional framework. As I said, the implementation is uneven. Next slide, please. I move to the conclusions which I've been building up along this presentation. And the main things that I would like to emphasize are four. First, moving towards activation of negotiated sharing settlements as multi-level government structures provide the architecture. And here I refer you again to the argument for horizontal federalism as a potent tool for solving interstate river water disputes, and multi-level federalism for encouraging robust local self-governments. The prerequisites of the water for everyone forever approach is also based on vibrant local communities adequately equipped and able to assume responsibility for community assets. Because if you want to exit, you need the community to take over and manage and decide how they want to carry it forward. The provision is there, the training is there, but the idea is not to hang on there, holding hands forever. It is that it is to be carried forward by the local communities. So this is a major element of the everyone forever approach. The role of multi-level government architecture and of corporate social responsibility funding, which is very important for sustainable solutions because it provides a buffer which enables assets which have been built with difficulty to be maintained and sustained. I would mention that I have myself visited many of these projects. In the Sundarbans, for example, we found that we had done quite a lot of work in schools, in hospitals, in communities. And then came the cyclone. Now that area is prone to cyclones. Some of them hit hard, some of them not so. And it has profound impact. And what do? You have to start afresh, exiting, then re-entering, or try to work with the local governments who have disaster management funds to see if these can be salvaged. And finally, I think it should be clear by now, Water Federalism 2.0 is defined by two terms: multi-pronged funding and multi-level federalism. These are the two major core components, and I think that what the pandemic has shown is that it is even more urgent, even more important to proceed on these lines to keep on track for the SDG 6. So with that, I thank you. I think the thank you is on the last slide. Okay, doesn't matter, I'll thank you personally. Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I exceeded my time, but I hope I didn't.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for this very informative presentation. And I would like to highlight the points we have mentioned and highlighted. I think you have touched three important points. That is the water for everyone and forever. Because water will remain the very important part of our life. So water, you talked about this water everyone forever, and that also bring my attention to this disparity of use of water at rural and urban level. And I think the water for everyone and forever this approach will certainly help us to bring down the disparity, the gap between the use of water between these the people at the different places. Second point that I think you highlighted, that is federalism, water federalism 2.0, where you are argued that the water federalism or the execution of power over the water sharing should go beyond that sharing of river waters, because since history we are just focusing on the sharing of river water between the states and among the different states in the country. So it is really important that you highlight this point. It is obvious that we need multi level governance and federal approach to deal with water. And the third point that I would like to add, that you have pointed out, that is the cascading federalism. I would call it a decentralization of water governance. And you pointed out very clearly pointed out that the water governance should go, the descent should go at the local level. And you also pointed out that the local bodies are more effective in terms of water governance than the central bodies. I also so thank you for this very I think wonderful presentation and very informative presentation. And this will help to the students, the young scholars and students who join this session over here.
Thank
I
you.
also highlight this point that the water will remain at the center of the geopolitics. Since it is the very important part, it is a center for the security, and it will remain for the center for the geopolitical tension in the future. And therefore, I would like to bring your attention to our next speaker, who is Dr. Punit Gaur, who is a very good friend of mine, and he's a director of the Center for G Global, I think Go Global and Global Silk Way Project Development, and it's from Eurasian National University, Kazakhstan. And he will be speaking on the geopolitics in the Central Asia in post-COVID-19 world. And I'm sure he will highlight how the geopolitics will be changing after the post-pandemic, in this post-pandemic world. Dr. Punit, the floor is to you.
Thank you so much, Chair. A very good friend of mine. Yes, absolutely right, Rao sir. And at the outset, I would like to give many thanks to personally Professor Pramod Jaiswal, and nice to give me this floor and share with you my own experiences in that particular region, which we called in Central Asia regions. Since 2016, I have been working over there, and I think in that way it will be very important to understand the politics and geopolitics. As Balveer sir has already mentioned, the water is going to be a very important aspects in this, and yes, in Central Asia region also, water is going to play a very important role as far as whole geopolitics of Central Asian countries is concerned. Although I am not going to touch with this particular topic of water in Central Asia, I will do is that I have divided my paper in three sections. First, a general view on what is exactly happened or happening in Central Asia as far as geopolitics is concerned. And the second, how the period of time major actors in this particular region changed their policy towards Central Asian region. And the third and the last one is what will be or what is the scenario after post-COVID or during the pandemic we have witnesses in this region. And this will be my hypothesis as well to develop further this paper after the discussions and deliberations. So as my topic is concerned is that geopolitics in Central Asia in post-COVID-19 world, but it is very important to understand what is exactly the Central Asian reason or geopolitics altogether went into the historical perspective, and then what is happening before pandemic and what will be the happen in post-COVID scenario. So Central Asia, the region made up of Kazakhstan, the Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan is a vast landmass separating the countries of Eastern Europe and the Caucasus from East and South Asia. Geographically, the strategic location of these countries make them a conduit between different regions of Asia and between Europe and Asia. One can extract the significance of the Central Asian region from the Spikeman Rimland and Mackinders Heartland theory, where more or less both shown the importance of the Eurasian region, which also include the Central Asian countries, especially in the context of geopolitics of the world. And over the past several years, the situation in this region in the world had changed qualitatively. In the early 1990s, no one could have predicted the US desire as the only remaining superpower after the collapse of the Soviet Union to dominate the world will turn against them, and not only will redraw the map of the world and to major changes developed after the Second World War security system, but to the emergence of an independent actor in the foreign policy of transnational networks, including terrorist organizations. The tragedy, and continue to that, the tragedy in New York and Washington on September 11, 2001 shocked the world. It was at once uncomfortable, a feeling of complete hopelessness. If the only superpower cannot ensure the security of its citizen, which is to talk about all the rest, understanding that since the tragedy, no one can feel safe and desire somewhere sincere, but somewhere associated with the attempt to use the best time to solve their internal problems. And this lead under the banner of the US-led anti-terrorist coalition, even irresponsible opponent policy of the country. And with that, the expansion of NATO, also the designation of the exile of evil, and the inclusion of the list of suspected sites of use of nuclear weapons in the US, Russia, China, Iraq, Iran, North Korea, Libya, and Syria, the unilateral US withdrawal from the Abian Treaty. These are some of the points which is very important to understand the geopolitics which is already happened in this particular region. That's why I included into this, which I'm going to further develop. The aggression against Iraq, wave of color revolutions in Georgia, Ukraine, and Kyrgyzstan, the desire to oust Russia in the post-harsh rhetoric against China, all the links of one chain, proving that the United States demonstrated their superiority too openly, shamelessly, and with pleasure. Inspired by the success of the sample forces in Afghanistan, Iraq, the US and its followers are no longer considered necessarily in some way to convince the world community. They did not ask as required. And we all witnesses that the end result of this policy has been disappointing. First, a wave of terror sweeping the world and to intensify the arms race, including nuclear. Secondly, the orientation of foreign policy to the law of force and double standard. As a result, a catastrophic decline in the level of responsibility in politics and broaden the scope of the armed forces in the defense of its national interest. Third, more and more clearly manifested by the inability to guarantee the safety of traditional international institutions, the UN, OSCE, NATO cope with their mission. Fourth, the United States, as the world seems to have lost guarantor in the field of international security, finance, technical progress, even democracy, etc. As a result, updated threat of universal chaos and standing on the agenda of world politics, rhetorically question who and how will be able to provide a global and regional balance of power in modern condition in non-polar world or multipolar world. Of course, occurred at the global level, the changes could not but have its influence of geopolitical development in Central Asia and hence on regional security. The first things to say is that as a result of ill-considered action of the global actors in world politics, as we all knew, the Afghanistan became a bleeding wound in the region and its process into the factors that have to be constantly taken into account when considering the issue of regional security. Secondly, one cannot say about the negative influence of the great game being waged between the major geopolitical actors for the restoration of or establishment of regional influence. The interest of these players diverse, hence the achievement of a consensus between them is unlikely. And we all witnesses this thing. The consequences of this situation somewhat. First, it is the desire of the leaders of the region to play on the contradictions between the geopolitical players that not only blurs the basis of regional integration, but also reduce the level of regional security, making the unpredictable behavior of the partners and to multiply the degree of distrust of him. So the second, the changing nature of relationship in the triangle of Russia, China, and the United States, the nature of these relationship has become a more pragmatic and tougher. It is anticipated that these pragmatism and toughness will be extended to those in this region. Third is the rapid rise of China in the area of Central Asia. Its main objective, the preservation of Central Asia as a strategic rear of China, the expansion of access of hydrocarbon and other resources, which is very well known of the region, the development of the infrastructure for the transportation of these resources in the PRC and the delivery made in China finished product to market of Central Asia, not only Central Asia, Russia and the Europe. Hence, on the one hand, the prospect of increased competition between China, Russia, and the US for access to resources in the region and the direction of their transportation. On the other, the inevitable increase in China's share in economy of the region, and the third, the temptation of some regional politics to use the growing interest of China to the resource of the region in order to achieve certain consensus from the Russian or foreign companies. In that context of the above, the main problem for the countries of the region lies in the fact that intensification of competition between the major geopolitics actors inevitably makes them more articulate foreign policy priorities, which significantly narrow the room for maneuver and possibility of multi-vector policies. All of this is on the internal situation in Central Asia, which, like any other region, is not free from problems. What are the most pressing security challenges today are taking place in Central Asia, which is very important to understand. That first, it is the growth of political extremism, the unpredictability of the social, economic, and political situation in the countries, and most importantly, the reluctance of neighbors in the region and Russia as other interested external actor, primarily China, US, and EU, and international organization to take responsibility for resolving the problem. The second, brought to the fore the problem of disengagement societies of the region along ethnic and clan lines. Today, the latent ethnic conflict escalate into open hostility, which I have seen with my own experience living in particularly in Kazakhstan and neighbors countries, which are somehow hidden because that is happening or happened in a very internal part of Central Asia, which is somehow the rule of authoritarianism or presidential rule is stopping them to highlight on the world level. And third, the upcoming change of political elites and the uncertainty of the vector of political development in general and the mechanism of transfer of authority from the president action to their successor in particular. The main problem stems from the fact that there is no clear answer to the question of whether the care will force the leaders of redistribution of property and the war of elites, which is very significant if you really want to understand the geopolitics of Central Asian region, especially in the context of major powers. Fifth, the kind of we got used to the growing influence of political Islam in Central Asia on the territory of almost all countries in this region, despite the official ban by the respective countries of Central Asia, not only to continue to operate a variety of organizations promoting the idea of political Islam, but in recent years has been an intensification of their activity. Moreover, not only in rural areas, but also in some part of urban areas as well. And this don't rule out the fact that these organizations are connected and some politicians, according to there are several other instances which happened in Kyrgyzstan, even in Kazakhstan, which I'm not going deep into due to the time constraint. The problem is that what is the basic things which is very important to understand. The problem is that the poor economic situation of many people and the lack of normal secular opposition encourages people to express political protest is a religious form, and in that way the religion is the only hope for social justice, and thought it would hardly be fair to say that most people pin their hopes on the Islamic alternatives, but this idea is already penetrating to the masses. Finally, we already witnessed the inevitable withdrawal of US and out of Afghanistan, and this had in my point of view, the two consequences which already happened. On the one hand, once again, as in the beginning of the mid-90s, actualized the issue of external aggression on the other state in the region, and Russia may have to solve all the problems related. This is not possible to solve all the problems by Russia related to Afghanistan. The main one being the possible emergence of new wave of Islamic radicalism throughout the region and the resurgence of Islamists in Central Asia. And then this particular interest of US presence in the region as a security manager, this is a big question in the US. There are attempts to share the responsibility for global leadership. However, the main problem lies in the fact that this intention, they cannot be find a decent partner, which they try to find out in the context of India or any other most probably they will focus on India to find a partner to have some kind of eyes on this particular Afghanistan. But to understand the contemporary geopolitics in this particular region, it's important to understand the various active actors' policies which significantly changed over the period of time. First, I will, in very brief, I will highlight what is US policy towards Central Asia and divided into two, the earlier period and new US policy. This will gives you a picture how they are changing according to the time being and how they are changing over the period of time. The earlier period, the US policy in Central Asia, the whole post-Soviet space is influenced by the following factors: the US relationship with Russia, the military operation in Afghanistan, the issue of NATO expansion, the energy factor, the coordination of the strategy of the West with the European Union, US relationship with the countries such as China, Iran, Turkey, Pakistan, and India, as well as the problem of radical Islam. In tradition, US approach to Central Asia, there are three approaches. First, the balanced capacity or strengthening. Second, above all, democracy. And third is safety first. The main method of US policy in the region are the following: economic cooperation and economic assistance, or creating the illusion of it. The pressure on human rights and democratization, focusing on security issue, including the military, political, and military technical cooperation, widely used as soft power. And then what will be the change in new US policy, which is announced recently, the through C5+1 diplomatic platform. C5+1 actively organized representative from the 5 Central Asian states and the US to address common concern as well as the promote regional dialogue and cooperation. The United States has 6 overreaching and mutually reinforcing objectives. These objectives are support and strengthen the sovereignty and independence of Central Asian state individually and as a region, reduce terrorist threat in Central Asia, expand and maintain support for stability in Afghanistan, encourage connectivity between Central Asia and Afghanistan, and last, promote rule of law, reform, and respect of human rights. So the same thing happened with EU. I'm going to give you a brief about EU, but one very important things which we need to extract from this is now whether it is US or whether it is EU, they forget about to establish a democracy. Now they are not talking about to establish first democracy into this country. They are more practical on this particular region of Central Asia. They have their own interest and they are manipulating to how they can achieve their own interest to forget about to establish democracy, which is known, which is a known trajectory of foreign policy of US or EU in Central Asia particularly. As far as European Union policy towards Central Asia is concerned, it is early period. The strategy and policy of European Union for Central Asia does not apply directly to the region security problems in the traditional military strategic term. However, the EU is able to indirectly affect the security of the region. This effect can be accomplished in several ways by European Institute like OSCE, the European Commission, the European Parliament. Second, the specific policy of the European powers, usually the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, and through a military, NATO, a political institution which includes the majority of EU countries. Talking about the EU's Central Asian policy, we should know two important points. First, the European Union, unlike the United States, China, and even Russia, is only related to the geopolitical actor in Central Asia. Secondly, the EU is stressed at a conceptual and practical level, favors the primacy of soft power over the traditional method of geopolitical power projection. It should be noted that this principle applies not only on Central Asia, but also in all other areas of foreign policy activity of European Union. Then what will be the change? If there will be any change, then what it is the change happened in new EU policy, which is in 2019. They come up with a new kind of policy. The new EU strategy must be interpreted as influencing economic and political processes in the region, especially in name of resilience of Central Asian countries, mainly in contradiction of unnamed voracious Chinese and Russian tendency. In that sense, the strategy is well placed to play on what soft power influence the EU does have in this region, like attraction for its educational and business model by presenting its vision of connectivity as a forward-looking, innovative, and equity-based alternative that will benefit societal development in the long term. And then the other major power, Russia policy towards Central Asia. The early period Russia policy towards Central Asia cannot be considered outside the context of overall foreign policy of Russian Federation in the CIS. In relation with other major players and policies at the bilateral level, Russian policy in Central Asia can still be described as a completely independent from the US and other factors, but two factors Moscow cannot ignore: the problem of Afghanistan and what is happening in Afghanistan and the impact of China. In Central Asia, Russian politics constantly encounter the presence of China as an equal the economic and political power. And this factor forced Moscow to have a distinct policy towards Central Asia. And this will lead to the new policy of Russia. The Russian foreign policy in Central Asia has three main goals. Which is I am describing the new Russian policy. The first is promoting security and military technical cooperation from the modernization of armed forces of the state of the region to the construction of military bases in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. The second is facilitating energy projects in the oil and gas sector and hydropower. The third is strengthening the integration institution of Eurasian Economic Union, in which Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan are full member, and Tajikistan is going to be, but there are some problems with Uzbekistan, which is only the observer member of this. And this is also one of the prime examples of geopolitics of regional actors in Central Asia. And what most important is China's policy towards this particular region. The very first thing when we are talking about early period of China's policy towards Central Asia, the very first thing which I would like to draw attention is that China's policy in Central Asia cannot be viewed outside the historical context. China has always been guided by two principles. First, the assessment of emerging problem in the region, forming the threats and challenges to China's national security. And secondly, the opportunity to address strategically important issue for China. China policy has changed just as much as the circumstances require, folding in domestic China and countries in the region, as well as the geopolitical context, and has evolved through several distinct stages, each of which has its own characteristics. Due to time constraints, will not go in depth to analyze it. Rather, it is important to look into the contemporary policy of China in Central Asia, which drastically changed the entire discourse of geopolitics in Central Asia. To understand China's contemporary policy towards Central Asia, it is important to have a brief assessment of the new Silk Road diplomacy, which is happening in Central Asian region. And it is very well known the significance of Central Asia can be easily understood when China inaugurated or announced one of its giant policy called BRI in Kazakhstan only. And this shows how China is for Central Asia, is how Central Asia is important for China's policy. Since then, the whole world witnesses how much China is proactive as far as region of Central Asia is concerned. And it is a known fact that major reason for this renewed Chinese interest has been attributed to mostly domestic rationales, a need to preserve stability on its border and in the western part of, especially in the western part of China, secure export market and energy supplies, develop inland transport routes as an alternative to unstable sea lines, and to narrow the development gap between the eastern and western part of China. And nonetheless, that what India is going to do or what it has done so far in Central Asia, this is also very important. Though we lack the direct access land route to these countries, but still somehow we manage what it's my own presumptions or it's my own thinking that somehow we manage through a soft power, we manage to give not alternative but another option to Central Asian region to look forward to have the collaborations in terms of India as an approach to these countries. And if we seen in a pragmatic manner the early period of India's policy at a time when India is really redefining its connection with Central Asian countries, India should take into account, or we are always taking into this account, the historical links with these countries, which go more back more than and Silk Road or Sakas and Scythians. We are always having the pressure on that. That yes, we have very old and historical relation with Central Asia. But what will be the current policy of India, which is going to define all this geopolitics in terms of Central Asian region? As far as current trajectory of India's foreign policy is concerned, it has two significant aspects, especially in the context of its regional approaches. The first is immediate neighborhood, and second in extended neighborhood. Later on, because of the mounting consumer demand, this is very important that in the later period of time, because of mounting consumer demand, rapid industrialization and technological advancement in India, energy diplomacy imperatives become apparent, and over the period of time India's trade with its extended neighborhood shows energy is a particular significant aspect, especially with the Central Asia and the Middle East region. So whether it is about geopolitics or geoeconomics, nations development or security, extended neighborhood would be the essential trajectory in India's foreign policy, especially when you have aspirations to become rising power, which is the case within India itself. And I just give you a brief about what is India's interest in this particular reasons. The first one is making a strategic space through SCO, SICA, the Eurasian Economic Union. We are doing some kind of things which we trying to make a strategic space into this region. And connectivity, yes, we were very well known about, we are very well known about the Chahabar project and what is happening with this Chahabar project, INCT, International North-South Transport Corridor. They are some of the prime connectivities projects which India is trying to do in their own way. And that's why there are so many questions always asking by through foreign medias or through whether other many other scholars to India, that how much and how far you can go to save these kind of connectivities projects into this manner, and then building partnerships. And we are always having this building partnership. Or security concern is also very, especially with the Islamic radicalizations in these countries. So that's why these are some of the points which is very important. And reviving culture connect, which is culturally connecting, is always a prime focus of India's to these particular Central Asian countries. And through ICCR, through many other organizations, we are doing a, I think my own experience is saying that we are doing a great job in this particular things. And last but not the least, the conclusion which I made, and this is my hypothesis as well, which I'm going to develop further with this paper. Let's see how far I succeeded. That the fact that the interest in the Central Asian region in the post-COVID-19 will surely increase, which will unfold in the 21st century geopolitical battle in the expert community, which was discussed in the early 1990s or mid 1990s. The main cited argument is that, and this will be in my conclusion of this paper, is that due to this pandemic, especially when most of the countries focused on self-reliance and austerity, a geopolitical vacuum will be created in this region, which followed the region's dependency on China further. And this can be a very important and significant issue, and or maybe it is going to be a very important element in the future to discuss the geopolitical of Central Asia, because no doubt that this vacuum which is created with this pandemic is going to fill with the Chinas, and it's increased the dependency of China, particularly the elites of these countries. They have more and more dependent on China, and this can lead to further escalations of trade games after the post-COVID-19. And thank you so much. This is my conclusion, and I would like to have more question and answer sessions. Let's see how we can discuss this paper. Thank you, Chair, dear Rao, to give me this opportunity. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Puneet, for this such a comprehensive kind of, we can say, discussion about the geopolitics in Central Asia. And your presentation, I'll say, is divided into two parts: the changing geopolitics in Central Asia and the issues that will affect the geopolitics of Central Asia, like from the great power rivalry and this Islamic radicalization in Central Asia. All points you highlighted. And the second part of your presentation, which I feel very important, the changing interest of external actors, like taking from US to EU, China, and India, and they're changing interest in Central Asia. And this actually, this takes me somewhere back to this early 19 to this the heartland theory, which says that Central Asia will remain the center in this global geopolitical rivalry. And with highlighting this point, I think your presentation highlighted that how the Central Asia will still remain as a center in the geopolitical discussion, geopolitical rivalry, geopolitical debate in 21st century as well. Thank you for this wonderful presentation and being with us. We have very actually wonderful combination of scholars and themes that we are discussing here. The first scholar talked about this water and this water governance or water federalism. Second presentation dealt with this geopolitical geopolitics of the particular in Central Asia, which we can see the grand strategy or grand kind of this geopolitics. And the third presentation which we have with us, Dr. Maria Sailo, who will be speaking on this, the COVID-19, the race and the ethnic disparity in this state of California. At least the ethnic ethnic and the race, and we can say somewhere or cultural aspect of this, the entire discussion of the COVID-19. So Dr. Maria Sailo, who is a former assistant professor of St. Joseph College of Arts and Science, and I request Dr. Maria Sailo to take the charge.
Thank you. Thank you to the Director of Water Policy Center to promote JustWall for inviting me to this conference webinar. And I'm so happy to meet our Professor Balvir Arora, who was our professor, as well as the university rector while we were a student. And it's a great honor to be here with all the other speakers. A brief introduction about myself. I have been teaching in Lady Shriram College, LSR, and as well as National Law School during a research, and then to the St. Joseph College in Bangalore. And I did a few courses here in Stanford University. And now I'm a member of a non-profit organization here in US called She Flew the Coop. It's about women's empowerment movement. So I'll do a presentation now. My topic is race and ethnic disparity in times of COVID-19 in the state of California. The trademark of COVID-19 in US is the racial disparity. By August 28, 2020, COVID-19 has claimed more than 180,000 lives and 5.85 million cases. The state of California has the highest rate in terms of cases and deaths, which has surpassed the hard-hit New York State. The mortality rates among the minorities, Black, predominantly the African American and Indigenous Americans, experience the highest death toll from COVID-19. Black Americans experience the highest mortality rate nationwide, more than twice as high as the rate for white and Asians, who have the lowest rate. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who is the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, pointed out the similarities between HIV/AIDS affecting gay community and COVID-19, which is a shining bright light on how unacceptable health disparity among the Black community are. Shelter in place in San Francisco. On March 4th, Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, proclaimed a state of emergency to ensure public health and safety. Then on March 16, 2020, shelter-in-place warning was declared in San Francisco and the surrounding Bay Area to limit the spread of coronavirus. San Francisco shelter-in-place was the first in California, and the rest of the other states followed. By early April, the virus was prevalent in Bay Area and Southern California counties and became more concentrated in Los Angeles and Imperial counties toward the end of the month, spurred by community spread. California is now stratifying COVID-19 data by race. In California, Latinos or Hispanics are the most affected. By the mid-April, California Department of Public Health released data representing 54% of COVID cases and 53% of deaths. Out of this data, 26% of deaths were among Latinos, 18% among Asians, and 18% among Blacks. Data released by Los Angeles County showed different picture. Black residents are dying at a slightly higher rate than other groups. Sutter Health, which is a very prominent national hospital and research network, highlighted that African American COVID-19 in Northern California are 2.7 times more likely to be hospitalized and arrive at hospital with more severe symptoms than non-Hispanic whites. These findings, after adjusting age, sex, income, and underlying health conditions, confirm that race and ethnicity play a pivotal role in accessing health care. Sutter Health research team has reflected the importance of not just revealing the disparity, but in finding solutions to equity gaps and to address unmet needs of those at higher risk groups. Though African Americans are about 60% of the total population in California, they constitute 10.3% of COVID deaths, where race or ethnicity is reported. Frontline essential workers. So the death rate of the African Americans are also due to the lack of access to healthcare, education, income and wealth gaps, and crowded living conditions, lower paying and unstable jobs, no flexibility, no options to work from home, higher risk of exposure, cannot miss work even in sickness because they do not have enough money to buy essential food. All of these factors have led to the community spread. And another factors included the growing unemployment rate among these minority groups, eviction, homelessness, sharing of living quarters, cultural practice of multi-generational living in one household. Higher rates of medical conditions. Native Americans relatively have higher rates of diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease, making them as a vulnerable group. The Indian Health Service, which served 2.2 million American Indians and Alaska Natives, is chronically underfunded and under-resourced. Public Policy Institute of California finds that 33% of African Americans are very concerned about contracting COVID-19 as compared to 18% of white Californians. Let's look a bit about poverty in California. California is America's richest state and is also its poorest. US Census Bureau have provided that California's poverty rate is 19%, that is 7.5 million people, while the national average is 14.1%. Skyrocket housing costs and low-wage jobs are the causes of poverty and staggering inequality in the Golden State. Most poor families in California are working. More than a third of Californians are living in or near poverty. Crises are worse among its Latino communities, which is the state's largest ethnic group. In 2018, 22.9% of Latinos lived in poverty, 18.2% of African American, 15.9% Asian American or Pacific Islanders, and 12.8% of whites. California Latino economic institutions have reported that 80% of Latinos cannot afford to buy a home. 62% of Latino households are substandard as defined by the federal guidelines, including inadequate kitchen, bed plumbing, overcrowded, and overpriced. COVID-19 and the most important factor and effects is the online learning, which has excluded the poor students. Experiences diverge dramatically when campuses are closed. Students from low-income, ethnic minority communities are in crisis. Educational inequalities, digital divide, unequal access to computer, internet connections, Google Hangouts where teachers give them assignments, no educated parents to lean on to. Most of them works 2 shifts and are single parenting. So the longer this goes on, the longer will a generation be left behind. People are worried, not just about dying, but being laid off from work, what to eat, and how to pay rent. In higher poverty, low income, majority Latino districts, online attendance of students are very low. Luis Chadis, this is a case study, a social studies teacher in Augustus Hawkins High School in southern Los Angeles, has 120 students when school was closed. But he never had more than 15 attend in an online class. So there is a deep disparity along the lines of race, ethnicity, and family income when it comes to online learning. Now, let's talk about the politics of pandemic and the presidential 2020 race. In the Democratic National Convention and in a week followed by the Republican National Convention, what are the competing visions of America? For Donald Trump and Biden's campaign are mainly over the deadly pandemic, race and ethnicity, spiked by the police brutality, the Black Lives Matter movement across the country, and the economy struggling to bounce back, which has become an unprecedented and new to modern times. Features of presidential 2020 campaign for Trump is to undo the 4 years of chaotic leadership, and for Biden is to appear less passive and move the country to a more inclusive governance. So the election that we're going to face in November 2020 is now nicknamed as the pandemic election. Democrats argued that a Trump second term would put the foundation and institution of American democracy at risk. Republicans, on the other hand, argued that a Biden presidency would bring a dystopian future of chaos and violence in the streets, a socialist government in Washington, and a rollback or loss of fundamental freedoms. Let's see the world's perspectives of the United States in the post-COVID time. Loss of confidence in itself as it grapples with the pandemic, no longer considered as a leader, particularly in dealing with the pandemic because it now has the highest number of infections and deaths. B, long-standing political divisions, racial reckoning like never before, doubt of the United States' appetite or capacity for a collaborative leadership role at the time when health and economic and environmental crisis is calling out for committed global cooperation. Thank you. I leave the floor for further discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Maria, for this wonderful presentation. And I think you are, I'm summarizing with your this session of this presentation. You touch the point of how the local community, particularly in this California, are affected by the COVID-19 and this pandemic, particularly during the lockdown. We see the whole community across the world suffered a lot, particularly those who are, we can say, temporary workers or laborers, and those are indigenous people in particular are suffered a lot, because those who are having a good job and even salary even during lockdown down, they have, I mean, they're saying, okay, we don't have issue, just extend the lockdown. But the people who are daily surviving on a daily wages and surviving on this, we can say, daily earning, affected more. And I think you have touched the entire discussion from the we can say the issue the indigenous people are suffering and during this pandemic again, and how the US politics, how the US politics became again central in this even during this pandemic, and how the politics of the election of president became central in this even during this pandemic in media and in all the discussion. Thank you for this presentation. Now I call our last speaker, Dr. Anmol Mukhia. Is he there? Are you there, Dr. Anmol Mukhia? I think no, he's not there. Okay, so we have a lot of time now, and we'll open this floor for question and answer. So let's begin. I'll request all the audience to write your questions in the chat box so I can forward to the respected speaker. And I have a question here. Questions asked by Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, and there are 3 questions asked by Ambassador Sajjanar to Dr. Puneet. And I'm sure you are able to see these questions. I just repeat the questions. And first of all, Ambassador, appreciate you for this comprehensive presentation. And he asked you, how have BRA project in Central Asia been affected by the COVID-19? This is the first question. Second question, Ambassador asked, how do you assess the possibility of growing contestation between China and Russia in this region? And the third question that you talked about the possibility of vacuum in this developing this region, and he asking what will you see that Russia allow? Will you see that the Russia allow that it happens and let this region move out of this sphere of influence? So, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Sir Ashok Sajjanar sir. And yes, the very first question which you ask is that no doubt it is affected. Whether we can call it adversely affected or somehow affected, yes, it is, but it is affected. But it is, in my point of view, but it is important to understand in this context that which major power will be able to come with more forces as possible after this pandemic, after pandemic. And I think that China will surely lead in this region after this pandemic, and not only because, and in my point of view, this is not happen only because China have resources or has resources to do that, but also because, as I said, the dependency of elites of these countries on China, which I am my own experiences with these working with in these countries. So I think this is the major concern in that point of view, that how China will going to succeed. I think it is deliberately created vacuum in this particular during the pandemic, and I think China created or not, it is further accelerations of it. exhalations of this deliberation. But yes, this particular vacuum is only filled by able to fill with China. But the second question is somehow related with the first one, and it is very important to understand with the first one is it is not about, I think, in my point of view, it is not about growing contestations between China and Russia, but in fact, it will be about compliance between China and Russia in Central Asia region, especially in terms of China-US contestation. I think this is going to be a very important at how China and Russia compliance in this region. Although it is very hard to say that Russia will allow in what extent to China to have their own impact or their interest in Central Asian region. But we have already seen that as far as Russian policy towards Central Asian is concerned, they always focus on the shared history and the kind of particular soft power, which I have seen in my point of view, that how they changed from hard power to soft power over the period of time. And once in one conference, I have deliberated on these issues. The Russia's policy towards Central Asia has changed during the period of time from hard power to soft power due to some several reasons, which is including the other major powers' influence in the Central Asian region. And I think that that is also very important to understand in this context. And yes, the way the China and US is happening in this particular trade war or any other issues in Indo-Pacific issues, I think that that is also very important to see in the context of compliance between Russia and China, especially post COVID-19. Thank you, sir.
Puneet, for addressing the question. Dr. Maria, I have a small question to you. Since you deal with, you are working with civil society organizations, and you also talked about the indigenous community and indigenous people, are particularly ethnic, ethnic and race in this in your presentation. I have a small question, like how the civil society, in particular in California, responded this COVID-19, and particularly in terms of helping these indigenous people and the ethnic groups in the California, please.
Yeah, there have been an outreach programs, particularly in the organizations of Native Americans, and there are networks that have been working to identify various measures, which includes like income gap, living conditions, because majority of these ethnic minorities, which in America would include the Native Americans, the African Americans, and the Latinos, and particularly in California, we deal mostly with the Latino communities because they are the largest minority here in California. So what for example, the Sutter Health department is doing is identifying the broad spectrum of this, like for example, income disparity, which is actually the widest gap of income disparity is in the Bay Area, because like I have said in the presentations, because of the high cost of living, okay, and then the low paying jobs. And I want to mention that this minority communities, particularly the Latinos here in California, are less educated. All right, they are less educated. They do not access high quality of education. So the number of high school pass out is very low. So, and these sectors are usually employed in the informal sectors, which we would include the frontline workers, the essential workers, where we find them in the grocery stores, where you find them in the cleaning, or in the processing, backroom processing of companies. where there is a not enough ventilation, and then also their close living quarters. Because of the high cost of homes, they live in small quarters, and they are like about many people living in small living spaces. So all this has contributed a more spread, community spread among the minority regions. So the study of this ethnic minorities in California and their effect on the pandemic is not to reveal the disparity, but more to find a solution as how best the policy can be developed, so that there could be less of inequity and gaps, to shorten the gaps between these inequities.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. Dr. Maria, Professor Balwil Arora have one question with you, and the question like online courses and work from home have differential impact, you said. So what are the forces you foresees which would like this to be prolonged? Question is in chat box. The question is in chat box, and the question is that what are the forces you foresee which would like this to be prolonged?
To be prolonged,
Yeah.
sir. The online courses and work from home, here what we are experiencing, and because I also have two daughters who goes to school, and but they do not go to school now, and my husband, who works in the in the Silicon Valley, he works here, he works from home. So what we see now, I first want to talk about this. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, like across the country, it's very difficult to deal with this work from home and homeschooling. So what the California school district has trying to come up is how best can we manage how best can we manage sending children back to school? What are the managements? What are the parameters that they're going to follow? So we are hoping, though the Vice President Mike Pence said in the Republican National Convention that let's get a little bit the political side. Though he said that we are in the blue state, sir. We are in the blue state. California is a blue state, so they are not trying to open the schools. Whereas in the red states, they are opening schools. Red states means the Republican states. So they are opening up schools, but we are in the blue state, and our governor is Democrat, so we're not opening schools right now. So that is the political dimension of so we're not opening. We are not a rush to open schools. And though Joe Mike Pence said that schools should be open, the governor, Gavin Newsom, is a Democrat governor, has not yet made any declaration for opening up schools. But on the general opinion is that we wanted school to open as soon as we can. And
Right.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Arora. Yes,
Yeah.
Professor Arora.
Can I intervene for a supplementary, Chair?
yes,
Yes, Professor, yes.
Yeah. No, Maria, I think the point you raised, because we are going through the same thing.
yeah,
And there's chaos as far as the schools, the examinations, and all are concerned. And the work from home, for example, my son-in-law works for Adobe,
Okay.
and they have extended work from home till next July. Now, what I am wondering is, this is not, of course, in the US, there is this blue-red conflict right now, which is quite acute. And so I understand that dimension. I am seeing it from the point of view of the universality of differential distribution of handicaps. Okay, you raised that point, which means online courses are only available to those who have the technical and the bandwidth and the internet connectivity and the electricity. There's a whole lot of things there. The second thing is that the way in which some of these temporary solutions are finding proponents who see an opportunity to cut costs, but to the permanent disadvantage of some segments of the population. You're understanding what I'm saying?
Yes.
For work from home, for example, some businesses are giving up their rented premises, saving on rent, and maybe not trying to get back to them. So my question, since we are talking about, and the pandemic has had this effect of leveling the world in a sense, is that California and Uttar Pradesh face the same problems as far as, so what are the forces which will push to making some of the things that we have resorted to under compulsion? What are the forces which will want them to be permanent? Work from home, for example, means you have to have a home. It can only be for white blue collar workers. It can't be for a whole lot of people. So we need to see through this. And the other point that I would like your intervention on is that we are seeing that under the cover of COVID, under the cover of pandemic, certain retrograde repressive legislation is being pushed through. Thinking that nobody is watching, this is the time everyone is busy with fighting the pandemic. So labor laws are being changed to the disadvantage of labor. They are extending the contractual laws, removing protection. I'm giving a few examples. Since we have this common concern of what after the pandemic, we are undergoing, I've been locked up for 5 months. So because they say I'm in a high risk category, I shouldn't be moving around and so on and so forth. But that is nothing compared to the suffering. People are being pushed below the poverty line. You saw how migrants were stranded. You see now how, and that is a real possibility, a large number of people will suffer from malnutrition, and particularly, as I said, the girl child. Okay, so that's my question. It's a rather long question, Chair, sorry. But I wanted to share this with Maria, because what we are finding is that though we may be living at opposite ends of the world, the problems are comparable, let's say.
Thank you, Professor Balavi, for this intervention. Professor Balavi, you talk about this water for everyone, forever, and you people are working with the different various districts in the different part of the country. While working with these local bodies or local authorities, what are the challenges you face while implementing this project, Water for Everyone Forever? So, problems you facing and problems the local authorities facing or to implementing this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have a stage-wise implementation process where first we see what are the existing resources, what is the existing distribution of resources, because there you do find that in certain communities some segments are left out. So since we are working forever, we have to zero in on those who are excluded. exclusion can be due to gender, exclusion can be due to caste. So where intervention is required, you first have to understand that. We don't have too much difficulty in getting the idea accepted that water should be available to everyone. In the previous organization where I was for 9 years on the board of Plan India, we were focused on the girl child, and we paid particular attention to providing separate toilets in schools. Now that makes a big difference to the education for girls. So you have to identify the need, because otherwise the girls, if there's no separate toilet for them, would go back home, walk 2 miles, 3 miles, that wouldn't come back to the class. So these little interventions where you see that you can make a difference, we haven't, as long as everyone gets it, that is the key. If you say that you're taking it away from some and giving to others, there is resistance. You say you're getting too much, no, you must share. No, we don't go into that. We say everyone. So if everyone is getting, they say, let them also get, we don't mind. And so there's no psychological resistance to, then we move in, find funding partners, associate with the local municipal councillor, the ward, sorry. The basic principle, to cut a long story short, because we could go on, I mean, I'm quite passionately involved. Maria, after retirement, I got into all these things.
Yes,
So
I can see that,
background.
I can see that, sir.
When you are dealing with communities, corporate social responsibility helps, because if there are industries in the area, their workers are in these bastis, for example, and in schools. Now there is absolutely no resistance to helping schools. You just go into a school, you provide the toilet, you provide the hand washing facility, you provide the soap. Very often the soap manufacturers give you the soap to put in the schools. It is, it's overall very edifying to see the impact you can make. And only thing I'll say is that this forever thing is the tricky part, is that once you leave and there's a cyclone and salt water comes into the fields, then the drinking water that we had installed with tube wells has to be shared with the animals also, because they can't drink the water. So there are problems like that, which we need to rethink. Normally we then become advocacy and pressure government to use the disaster relief funds to sort this problem out, saying that we've done the initial work, now you have to keep it, help them keep it going. Do I answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. I don't see any question in chat box now. So I must say we should wind up this session now. And
Director,
yeah.
Can I ask a question to Professor Balveer, please?
Yeah, sure.
Sir, I really enjoy listening to your presentation. And one thing that struck me so much was about discriminating distribution. That you talked about discriminating distributions and caste-based deprivation, as well as gender-based deprivation. And I think this is a reality now that we are facing in terms of what you've talked about, unequal access to water resources. And I think it's a reality. And I would like to ask you a little bit about this, the gender-based deprivation, where you focus on the girl child. What is the impact of a girl child when, in terms of discrimination of distributions of water resources?
Yes, yeah, I'll take just a couple of minutes if it's okay. Yeah, no, I think your question is very important because gender parity and gender justice are very crucial issues if a country has to achieve its full potential. The girl child is very severely handicapped. From the moment she's born up to the time that she is hurriedly married off, because in times of difficulty, families see her as a burden. They take her out of school. If there's not enough food, they get her to work in the fields or to marry her off as soon as possible. I think that in India, one of the impacts of this COVID thing, because we are talking about foreseeing how it's going to change. One of the impact to watch out for is that our girls and young girls and women don't suffer. It is going to be, there's not a real policy at the government level for that. These policies of water for everyone and nutrition now for everyone, if you can see that when the schools are closed, for example, the midday meal scheme, which was a major source of nutrition for children, the children came and benefited, of course, through education, but through, once the schools are closed, the dry rations are deposited in the house. Does the girl get her share? Maria, in a short sentence, I'll say, we have to ensure that girls get their due share. I think that is the key to the whole thing. If you can ensure that they get their due share, that they're entitled to half, they should get half. If not half, they should get 45%. You start with the practical, but due share and due equity is the crux of the problem.
Yes, yes, sir. That's very true. You are right. The COVID-19 has also impacted school students who do not have food to eat. Even here in California, there's poverty. It's the highest. Like I said, it's the richest as well as the poorest state. The students, there are thousands of students who do not have midday food to eat because the schools are closed, and so there is a food drive going on. And also the girl child, because of this stay at home or shelter in place and social distancing, like you said, have affected girl child because of abuses at home. There are reports going on. So like you said, sir, the policy has to target the girl child. For every policy has to target the girl child for the distribution to be less discriminatory. Thank you so much, sir.
Women, Mariam, women, I'm not going into the whole range. We are doing work on this in the Center for Multi-Level Federalism, but domestic violence is another issue that we can't ignore in this. So which is why it's a range of issues, but I think if you have this one principle in mind, girls and women being treated fairly, I think you know which direction to go.
Yes, sir, yeah, I'll continue it through the mail. I'll mail you, sir.
Okay, do that. Lovely.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Balavir and Dr. Maria for this intervention. There's a last question to Dr. Punit Gaur, and then we'll wind up. Dr. Punit Gaur, you talked about the geopolitics in Central Asia and the interest of the different great powers in Central Asia. I'm very curious about to know about what the Central Asian countries think about this geopolitical rivalry, Central Asia, particularly in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan think about this geopolitical rivalry and the interest of no great powers, their interface in Central Asia. Please, just 2 minutes and we'll wait. Just unmute yourself.
Yes, there are a very simple answer of this question is that they are taking advantage from all the major powers. And that's why their policy is based on multi-vector foreign policy. All the Central Asian countries relies more or less on multi-vector policy where their foreign policy is directed from several major powers who try to find out their space in this region. Okay, if you want to find out the space in our regions, give us back something. And they are taking advantage from all the major powers as much as they can get. And that's why this is very important to understand that they also see towards India, not as an alternative, but as options. Their all options are open to collaborate, to cooperate. That's why this is very important to understand the geopolitics in terms of Central Asians perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Punit Gaur, for this intervention, this response to the question. And I thank you all the panelists, all the speakers for being with us and for spending time with us and for this wonderful discussion actually. I'm very young to actually moderate this session, but you people made it easy for me and intervening on time. Thank you for this for coming here. Now I request Gayatri.
Yes. Distinguished chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the session, I take great honor in proposing the vote of thanks on behalf of NICE to all who have graced us with their presence and contributed their parts to make this event a resounding success. We would like to express our profound gratitude and sincere thanks to Raosaheb Bawaskar for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. A sincere thanks also goes to all the speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such a comprehensive and convincing presentation. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, I must also mention a deep sense of appreciation for the audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making the session productive with your questions. We are truly honored to have had you all with us this morning and hope to stay connected with you in future as well. It's really been a pleasure. Also, do join us to our next session. Thank you so much.